The Ganges, a revered river, has borne witness to countless tales of human life. My existence as Ananya unfolds in a serene riverside village that seems as calm as the still waters. Yet beneath this placid exterior lies a tumult of emotions, moments when the heart challenges logic. This is my story of love, sorrow, and self-discovery. I am Ananya, 28 years old. Reside in a little town on the banks of the Ganges where the water runs indefinitely, carries the pure air of the land and heaven from a distance. My community appears serene with palm-thatched homes, meandering dirt roads, and the sound of temple bells resounding in the evening. But the calm is just on the surface. Outsiders will never see the hidden waves that lie behind it. Much like the river and my life too. Years spent by the river has taught me that nothing lasts forever. The river might be peaceful on a foggy morning before becoming violent when it rains or floods. My life is no different. There are days when everything moves slowly like a little boat bobbing on a pier. However, there are moments when a storm tears apart my heart, carried away by emotions I cannot control. I am a wife, a mother, and a lady living under silent expectations since marrying Ishani. I've become accustomed to seeing him leave for the pier every morning, watching his figure go on the little boat at those moments. I am left with only an empty house, nameless thoughts, and a sense of loneliness in my spirit. My heart yearns for something larger than the framework I was taught to obey. But like the river out there, I know I can't go beyond the limits established. By fate, my husband Ishan is a man whom everyone in the community admires. He was 5 years older than me, a talented fisherman who had spent his whole life traveling down the Ganges River to make a living. His hands were calloused and powerful from years of tightly clutching the oars and hauling each net loaded with fish and shrimp to me. Arjun was not just a husband, but also a pillar of one who provided a full existence for me and my young daughter in the face of nature's harshness in the early years of my marriage. I thought I was the happiest two-man alive every time. Ishan returned from a long journey. He brought a grin, stories about the river, and modest presents from remote villages. At the time, our love was like a boat packed with fish gently nearing the coast of contentment and fulfillment every morning as I saw him off at the wharf. His tall form in the murky mist always made me feel safe. But time, like the water under the boat, moves softly, carrying those precious moments with it and never returning. I no longer race to the pier when Arjun returns. Instead, I stand at the door watching his boat from a distance, unsure if I'm waiting or simply repeating an old habit every time Ishan leaves home with his oars in the expectation of a good fishing excursion. My heart skips a beat, but that flutter is not caused by concern for his safety, but rather by a sense of loneliness that seeps into every area of my psyche like water. Without Arjun, our house feels weirdly empty. I work diligently to care for my young daughter and manage the chores, but every day when the sun sets over the river, I feel lost. The chirping of insects in the yard, the distant sound of waves lapping at the shore, it all contributes to the quiet too. There are moments when I feel overwhelmed, questioning whether love can fade with the passage of time, or if I have transformed, no longer the vibrant woman I once was at the start of our marriage. Our lives unfolded in a monotonous rhythm, repeating day after day, until the day Ishan's father Devraj came to live with us. He had recently endured a significant illness and was no longer capable of living independently at the age of 65. He was a composed, intelligent man, marked by a lifetime of hard labor. His back slightly bowed, his hair white, yet his eyes remained bright and warm, as if they held a treasure trove of life events I had never touched. Initially, I felt disappointment upon receiving this news. Caring for an older person would add another burden to my already hectic schedule. I didn't voice my feelings, but internally, I grappled with the thought of taking on another person while wrestling with my own empty heart. However, when Devraj arrived with his leisurely gait and charming grin, I realized my mistake. He infused our modest dwelling with a fresh vitality. Though he spoke little, each story he shared carried a strange tranquility, as if he were imparting fragments of wisdom only those who have endured adversity could possess. He recounted his childhood as a skilled carpenter, building structures for the entire hamlet, and shared memories of his late wife. He adored her and never forgot, even after many years had passed. I found myself spending more time with him, not out of obligation, but because I felt a sense of comfort in his presence. He taught me the art of listening, the value of patience, and offered a fresh perspective on life. Our dinners grew increasingly intimate as he recounted his adventures, noting every detail of the house and complimenting me on how well I cared for my family, words I hadn't heard from anyone in ages. When I served him tea, he looked at me with gratitude and said, "You bring this house to life." I was taken aback, as if a gentle breeze had swept away a part of my loneliness. How long had it been since I felt acknowledged and valued for my contributions? Since Devraj arrived, our modest abode has transformed. His presence has enveloped me. Amidst the tumultuous waves of my heart, I find myself uncertain. His anecdotes and minor concerns seem to offer a glimmer of solace, suggesting that Devraj embodies not only fatherly wisdom, but also the balance I had been searching for, albeit unknowingly. Yet, this realization also fills me with trepidation. A sensation stirred within my heart, an indescribable shift that I hesitated to confront. Each time it crossed my mind, I brushed it aside, convincing myself it was merely a blend of appreciation and familial loyalty. Yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was either deceiving myself or evading a truth that grew clearer with each passing day. The evening was serene, bathed in gentle moonlight that graced our thatched roof, while the soft chirping of insects filled the yard. In the kitchen, I busied myself with the swift preparation of tea, the fragrant aroma of the leaves wafting through the air, enveloping the space in warmth. Devraj sat on an ancient wooden chair in the corner of the house, his gaze drawn to the flickering oil lamp. Suddenly his voice rose gently yet resonantly, like a chant or a prayer. "You are such a capable lady, handling everything. Ishan is really lucky." I halted, my hands holding the teapot frozen in midair. Those remarks, as simple as they were, had an unanticipated impact. How long had it been since someone had said something like that to me? The daily rush and bustle had made compliments and attention feel like luxury items. I turned to look at Devraj. His eyes were friendly and free of pretension. I smiled softly and said nothing, but inside my heart, it felt as if a light had crept through the breach of the door, exposing the area where I had placed long-buried feelings. From that day on, I began to talk to him more, not out of obligation. As a daughter-in-law, the comfort derived from his stories was undeniable. Devraj possessed a distinctive way of narrating tales, treating each memory as a precious gem he longed to share. He reminisced about his youth with a sense of nostalgia. He was a remarkable carpenter, tirelessly dedicated to his family. He often spoke of his late wife, whom he described as the fire in his life, illuminating even the darkest moments. When he shared memories of her, I could see a deep love reflected in his eyes, one that transcended words, radiating warmth that enveloped me. Devraj's tales were not mere fragments of history. They were gentle breezes that disrupted the monotony of my life. I would sit in silence, laughing at his playful anecdotes and shedding tears during his poignant recollections of his wife. Through his stories, I entered a realm I had never envisioned, filled with emotions far more intense and profound than my own. One day, I prepared Devraj's favorite dish, a classic Indian meal rich in flavor, one he had once cooked with his wife. As I placed the bowl of dal on the table, I watched him savor each bite, and when our eyes met, he offered a soft smile. "You breathed life into this house, causing my heart to flutter," Although it was a simple phrase, it had the impact of a drop of water falling into a motionless lake, creating countless waves. I was accustomed to carrying everything in quietly, doing it alone, experiencing it alone, and never expecting a word of thanks. But his remarks made me feel noticed and valued in a manner I never thought I could want. Miss Amand, I developed a stronger relationship over time. Beginning with short stories and compliments, she was not just my father-in-law, but also a silent friend, hearing and feeling what I would never dare to express out. I gradually began to look forward to my time with him every day, is a peculiar synchronicity in his tales and gaze at his sympathy that I did not feeling. Ishan. Although knowing he was a nice husband, every time we sat on the balcony watching the Ganges rush past in the dusk light, I felt relieved, as if the waves of my heart had found a place to rest. But that tranquility also made me fearful. I realized that the sensation inside me was more than just thanks or admiration. Something deeper, stronger, and more deadly was emerging. I did not dare to identify it or confront the reality that was developing inside me. Every time Devraj looked at me with his compassionate eyes, I felt my pulse race, as if I were walking a fine line between right and wrong. While sitting on the porch one rainy day, Devraj turned to me and remarked, "You remind me of my younger days, when life was difficult but always meaningful." Those words, despite being only a brief exclamation, drew me into a world of unending pondering. I wondered if I was truly living with myself, or if I was simply doing what life required, attempting to fill the vacuum in my heart with nameless commitments and obligations. Those questions continued to increase, but I did not dare to seek the answers. Instead, I kept living with a shattered heart. On one side was the feelings that I couldn't admit, and on the other was the ethic and commitments that I wouldn't dare to violate. Looking at Devraj, I felt both familiar and foreign, close because of the implicit compassion, weird because I knew there was a line between us that no one dared to cross. But I also realized that such sentiments couldn't be concealed forever. One day the waves within me will break, carrying everything I've tried to repress, and I'm uncertain if I can stay composed when they attack. We never shared our deepest feelings, yet I sensed that Devraj experienced them. Just like me, with only a subtle gaze or a modest gesture, I sensed a remarkable synchronization between us. The sentiment, albeit wordless, was so strong that I couldn't ignore it. I lived in my own paradoxes, yearning for his sympathy, while still feeling burdened by my responsibilities as a wife every time Ishan returned from a long vacation. With a heavy heart, he entered the door, his eyes worn yet filled with hope. His calloused hands held modest gifts for his daughter, and as I looked at him, a deep sense of agony washed over me. How could I possibly love someone else while I remained his wife, lived under his roof, and shared his life? I didn't dislike or reject Ishan. He was a wonderful spouse, and I could see that he genuinely loved me. Yet, strangely, every time I thought about Devraj, my heart would stir. It felt like a small spark was quietly igniting within my spirit. The more I tried to extinguish it, the more it flared up. The situation intensified on a rainy night when the rain pounded against the thatched roof and the wind howled through the gaps of our little home. Devraj and I sat by the fire, the dim yellow light accentuating every wrinkle on his face. The house was quiet, save for the sound of rain and the crackling of firewood. Devraj shared stories of a long journey he had taken as a carpenter, his eyes distant as if he were gazing into the past. I listened closely, as if each of his tales held precious secrets that I feared might vanish at any moment. Suddenly the door swung open. I glanced over my shoulder. It was a shock to find Ishan standing there, drenched from the rain, his eyes fixed on us with an unsettling intensity. I couldn't discern what he had witnessed or the extent of his understanding, yet time seemed to pause in that instant. Devraj's eyes widened in confusion, and then he quietly stood up, deliberately avoiding Ishan's gaze. I tried to keep my composure and said, "You're back." It was still early, yet my voice trembled, betraying my anxiety. Ishan remained silent. He only gazed at me. His eyes seemed to penetrate every layer of security I had attempted to establish. I couldn't discern his thoughts at that moment, but I felt the pain reflected in his gaze. That night, Ishan remained silent, sitting by the window, staring out at the rain while I sat on the bed, contemplating how to confront what I knew was approaching in the days ahead. The atmosphere in the house grew increasingly tense. Ishan didn't openly question me, yet I caught him frequently glancing my way and at Devraj, his eyes searching for answers. I dared not meet his gaze for more than a fleeting moment, fearing that any words might unravel everything. Then came the letter. One morning, Ishan stumbled upon the note Devraj had left on the table. It was an emotional letter, thanking me for my care, yet each word seemed to carry deeper sentiments he struggled to convey. When Ishan finished reading, I noticed his face had turned pale. His hands gripped the letter so tightly that it crumpled. He turned to face me, his eyes brimming with grief and hatred. "Ananya, what is this?" he inquired, his voice quiet yet laced with wrath I had never witnessed before. I wanted to talk and explain, but how could I articulate emotions over which I had no control? I could only lower my head in silence, and with each passing second, it felt as if the entire world was collapsing beneath my feet. Ishan did not relent. He turned to confront Mr. Ra, who sat quietly in the corner, his eyes filled with remorse and despair. "What happened, Dad, between you and her?" he demanded, each syllable slicing through the air. Devraj opened his mouth to respond. Then a deep sigh escaped and silence enveloped the moment. As our encounter unfolded, Ishan's words resonated with a blend of anger and disappointment. He directed his blame not only at me, but also at himself. The years he spent on the river had left me feeling isolated. I yearned to contest his views, to convey that reality was not as he perceived, yet each time I tried to voice my thoughts, the buried emotions within me constricted my throat. Eventually, Ishan left the home, stepping into the darkness without a backward glance at me or Devraj. The door slammed shut behind him, enveloping me in a profound sense of sorrow and loss. I found myself unable to weep. All I could do was sit there, watching the kitchen fire gradually extinguish, taking with it the fragile hope I had clung to. Our humble dwelling has never felt the same since June, when he did not return for several days, and Devraj chose to leave as well, taking with him the silence and anguish he would never articulate. As for me, I remained with my child, clinging to the hope of salvaging my life from complete disarray. But deep down I realized that the undercurrents within me had wrecked all I treasured after the wet night. Departed the residence. He didn't say anything, but quietly collected his belongings and stepped out into the gray dawn. I waited at the door, watching his figure fade down the village road, my emotions in turmoil, unsure whether to grasp on or let him go. At that moment, the stillness between us was more profound than any words we could say. He didn't blame or hate, but I knew he was leaving to heal the wounds that his presence had unknowingly created. Ishan did not stop him or ask him questions. He simply stood in the kitchen, his gaze fixed on the nothingness, as if all he needed to know was already clear. After Devraj went, an imaginary barrier appeared between me and Argan. We continued to live under the same roof and in the same rhythm, but the quiet gaps widened. Ishan did not ask me any additional questions. But there was something peculiar in his eyes that I had never seen before. It was the gaze of someone who had once trusted passionately, but now harbored doubts and disappointments. I attempted to fill the gap with regular duties like cleaning. I am cooking and caring for my baby. Embraced motherhood wholeheartedly, seeking solace in her unadulterated laughter, even in those moments of joy. I experienced a sense of exhaustion, as if a fragment of my heart had been lost forever. Mr. R's mom's memories became a secret, I kept hidden deep within my heart, like an ancient box with items we dare not open. There were afternoons when the sunset turned the river red. I sat in the doorway watching the miniature boats float away. In such moments, I remembered Devraj as a quiet friend who had previously provided me with the comfort I dared not seek, rather than as a father-in-law. I worried if he was okay someplace far from this little community. Do you recall the days when we sat by the fire and spoke about daily things? I don't have an answer for. Nor do I allow myself to look for one of those sentiments while still present, are now merely part of the memories that I am not permitted to recollect. My marriage to Ishan has turned frigid like a boat floating without oars. He still goes to the river as before, but the outings are getting longer, and our chats are becoming less frequently. We don't bicker or dispute, yet we are no longer close. The meals become extended stretches of quiet, with just the sound of bowls and chopsticks touching, and a girl's innocent voice interrupting it. I used to believe that time would cure all wounds, but it simply makes the gaps permanently. I no longer anticipate change, or dare to believe that Arjun would forgive me. I take each day as it comes, striving to be the best mother I can for my child, wishing to provide her with a more peaceful existence than I experienced. There are nights when my daughter sleeps soundly, and I lie on my empty bed, listening to the wind outside and reflecting on my life. I wonder if I would be happier if it hadn't happened, or if I will continue to endure this suffering. From an unknown loneliness, I grasp that such questions will remain unanswered. Yet deep within, I recognize that my feelings for Devraj were not misguided. They were genuine, even if flawed and hard to accept. They became an inseparable part of me, impossible to overlook. I strive to forgive myself despite the challenge it presents. I understand that I cannot change the past, nor can I restore Ishan's trust. However, I can learn to coexist with those scars, embracing them as integral to my being, rather than allowing them to further diminish me. Years later, after the tumult has settled, I realize that my journey was not merely about loss. It was a profound lesson in humanity. Love and the delicate boundaries we must respect linger in my thoughts. Even after Devraj's departure and the unraveling of my marriage, I discovered a newfound strength in loving my daughter with all my heart. The secret of Devraj, a shadow in my memories, remains unspoken, a chapter of my life I cherish yet choose not to revisit. Reflecting on those times, I find that my anger towards myself has softened. The days of suffering imparted a crucial lesson. Every mistake is an integral aspect of our humanity, a vital part of the journey toward maturity. I have come to embrace forgiveness, not only for my own imperfections, but also for the emotions that faded, the vibrations that seemed off yet were undeniably genuine. Forgiveness transcends mere forgetfulness. It involves acknowledging their existence and recognizing how they have shaped me into who I am today. Life flows onward, much like the river outside my window, never pausing, never retreating. I have learned to move forward, step by step, through the long days that felt insurmountable. Though there are scars in my heart that may never fully heal, I have come to realize that they need not vanish to be accepted. Absolutely, they serve as a reminder of my journey and the significance of the serenity I have lost, which I am now striving to regain. The river outside embodies both tranquility and fury, mirroring my own existence. The massive waves once rocked me, yet they imparted the lesson of a calm shore where I can remain resolute, regardless of the harshness of the world beyond, amidst the ceaseless currents of life. I have learned to embrace my true self, flaws and all, as life continues to unfold like the river of the never-ending gang, bringing with it cherished memories. Roots and profound lessons shape my narrative, despite the pain and missteps. They are essential to my journey, I trust. Wherever you find yourself in life, may you uncover light in your darkest hours and embrace the power of forgiveness, both for others and for yourself. Thank you for listening to my story. Farewell, and may you always possess the courage to face the storm, the strength to rise above it, and the love to cherish the peace that follows. I hope to see you again someday.